Well, a new engine for me in this video. I'm doing a really old Land Rover. I don't quite know what model series or what it is. I believe it's an early series 2, but it's the first time that I've seen one of these. It's come in because I've pre-washed it because it was absolutely caked, but it's come in because my customer thinks it's had liners in it and it's bored slightly offset, so I've got to check this. The crank has had a heavy grind on it. It's been ground 60 thou, so 1.5 mil, but I've taken it all, well, it was already apart. I've washed it all, put it back together because I need to basically plan how it all sits and everything else. However, what I've realised is I've put the crank in it and lightly bolted it back in, and then the big end is bigger than the bore, so the piston needs fitting this way. So I've got to take it apart again, but before I touch that again, what's happened is that my customer's actually bought me over another crank. So I've started to shot blast it. I've put it through the cleaner, and what I'm going to do now is grind it and then I've crack tested it once. I'm going to crack test it once I've ground it. I've measured it. It's already standard on the mains and standard on the big ends. So yeah, I'll show you that now. So this is the crankshaft for the Land Rover, and as you can see, it's in quite a mess. There's some quite bad pitting on the big ends and on the mains. So I've levelled it up. I'll just show you some marks on the mains. It's quite deep there. So I've got it sitting nice and level in my crank grinder, and then what I'm going to do is try and grind it to 10 thou first, and hopefully try and save it. It is in a mess, but I think we could do something with it with a bit of luck. So the first thing that I've got to do grinding this crank is set up the fingers in the crank grinder, and also the last crank that I did, which was an air-cooled, the last bit that I did of it was the main, so I've got to change that. So I'm carefully bringing the wheel onto the journal of the crank, and then it needs adjusting to make sure there's enough movement in the wheel to get a full grind on it, but I don't think there is. I think it's going to need some adjustment. So what I'm looking for, I don't know if that's picking it up. Let me just move this up a bit. So what I'm looking for, in this window here, there's a little groove, and if I get the groove in the centre of the window, I know that I'm going to have plenty of movement to grind enough off the crank so I could go right up to like 60 thou. So I've set it to that. Then what I need to do is check the size on here, which is right, and then make the adjustments on this part of the wheel. So I undo the lock screw and then feed the wheel closer to the crank, tighten the lock screw back up, and then back this wheel here a full turn, so I know that I'm 1 full turn minimum away from this journal. Start the grinder, and then I know that I can feed in by 1 full turn without it touching, and then I then carefully feed the wheel in until it just starts to cut the crank or grind the crank. And you can see sparks coming off the bottom when it starts to work its magic, which is there. So I don't want to take any more off that. Let me just tip this down and show you. I don't want to take any more off the crank until we've got the suds running. So I'll turn the suds on, and that's drenching the stone and the crank with coolant. put the guard on, and then what I use is the wheel that I control the mains with as a reminder for where I started to grind on the big ends. So 22 on this wheel, I mirror it onto that wheel. And then what I'm going to do is start to plunge in on the journal, let it do a lap, and now I've got a couple of thou on that. I'm going to bite into the radius on both the right hand and the left hand side. I'm going to travel along to the left hand side of the journal. And then you can actually see the wear on the big end. Now hopefully that should be about 9 thou off, so I'm gonna move to the right hand side of my journal. And looking at this, I think this is going to have to go down another size to get it close, because there's still quite a bit of damage. Yeah, this journal's in still quite a bit of mess. You can feel the rust in there and where it's bit into it. So let's have a measure up. Yeah, that's actually 10 thou off that, so that's bang on top tolerance for a 10 thou grind. So this is definitely going to have to go to a minimum of 20. So what I'm going to do is I'll carry on grinding that. I'm going to put my GoPro on charge, and as soon as it's cleaned up, I'll let you know what it's gone to. So the next thing that I'm doing is trying to work out what's going on with the block. I've washed it. I've bolted the old crank in, which is massively oversized, then realised that the big end is bigger than the bore, so I'm going to have to take the crank back out and fit the piston up. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to take the rings off, because all I'm trying to do is know that the piston is in line with the crank and that the liners haven't been put into one side, which is making the side float on the small end press against the inside of the piston. So I'm going to flick that over, get a socket, let's get that bit stripped. I've ground the crank, which was in a real bad way actually. The only good thing about it, it was at standard size. It was standard on the mains and standard on the big ends, and I've had to grind it to 30 on the mains and 30 on the big ends, and there's still a little bit of rust left in one of the big ends, which I will show you that now. I brought it back over to the new workshop because I'm going to wash it all through, and then I'm going to micro polish it again. I've polished it once, but I'm going to micro polish it again, and I'm going to just try and hide some of the rust marks on it. So, well, not hide, treat it, I guess is the right word. So you can see there's still quite a lot of rust on the webbing of the crank. There's some rust in this radius here. There was bits of rust on the thrust, but I've tried to clean them out as best as I can. You can see it on there. But I mean, compared to what it was, it's immaculate. I'm going to press the gear off for him. There's a tiny little mark left here, and the main mark really is just, I don't know if the light can pick it up, but it's just there. But that is quite deep. I don't think it would machine out. Compared to what it was like, it was in a right state. It's immaculate. I mean, it's come up really nice. I just want to try and get rid of some of this a little bit. So I'm going to let it spend the day in the hot tank and, like I say, take this gear off and just try and make it a bit better. But I've measured it up. It's all really good. It's all good for size. It's on the top tolerance. And the only mark that's bad really is that. But and that's it. I'm going to carry on with this, and I'll film what I find. I'm going to measure the piston as well, and measure the bore to make sure we've got the right piston to bore clearance, because what my customer might have had was just whoever's fitted the liner hasn't got the clearance right, and that's why it might have felt a little bit tight. But we'll get it flicked over, we'll measure the piston, measure the bore, and then try and fix as necessary. The next thing that I'm checking on this 1600 Land Rover engine is my customer had worries that the previous machine shop had put liners in and bored the liners incorrectly, so it was moving the pistons over in the bore and putting a load of side wear on the conrod or inside the piston. So the easiest way for me to check that is to fit the old crank, which is scrap but we've got bearings for it, take the rings off the piston, off all 4 pistons, and then just dry build the engine or dummy build the engine. So then I could turn the engine over and see that I've got side float, which is down there. If I get this bit of rod, side float there and there, and I can check each and every one of them. So the liners that have been installed at the previous machine shop are in there okay, they're not offset. So that's okay, we haven't got to adjust that. Next thing I'm going to do is measure the pistons and then measure the bore to see what piston to bore clearance we've got. So I've honed and measured this Land Rover engine now, and it's probably about 2.5 thou bigger than the recommended piston to bore clearance. That's maximum. I've straightened up the bores because they had a bit of taper to them. There's a slight bit of wear left, which you can see, but my customer's been up and I've gone through everything with him and he's happy to run it like that. But what he's done is, where this has been linered, whoever linered it before has put it back to a standard size. And what my customer's done is he's bought rings at 10 thou bigger, so I've now got to gap these to close up the gap a little bit, because when I put the standard size ring in there, the gap was probably just on the high side. So we've bought he's bought plus 10 rings, which I'm going to gap to the right size, and then this job is done. It's all been through the cleaner, so it's all nice and clean for him, so he can then come and collect it, and then he's going to reassemble it. So what I'm doing now is gapping the rings, and there's roughly about 25 thou needing to come out the top rings to get the gap right. But what I don't want to do is start to grind it square on this edge, because with so much having to come off, it will actually lose the shape, so they won't butt up like that. If I keep grinding, they'll go off slightly like that or like that. So what I'm going to do is take 10 thou as a first cut, then I'll go and check that they butt up quite nice, and then just keep going until I get the gap right. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm taking the same amount off all of the rings. So I set up the grinder, make sure as soon as it starts to grind that my dial gauge, which is just here, is reading 0. And then what I don't want to do is blue the ring as well. So I'm just going to keep taking a couple of thou each time. I don't have to worry about the finish because I'm going to be nowhere near at 10 thou. First, or the third one done. I'll just break the edge off with my finger nail. Now there's 2 of these rings per piston. These are the compression rings, and then there's 2 of these oil scrapers per piston as well. These are harder to grind because they don't like fit, they're very difficult to clamp down. I might not even get a clamp on there. I should do, I might just have to bend it up a bit. I'll do all of these first anyway. The last thing that I'm doing on the Land Rover 1600 is to sort the valves out. I've shot blasted them, I've polished the stem, and now I'm refacing them. That one's done. This one, however, is in quite a bad way. I mean, it'll repair, but you can actually see the dark part, if I can hold that there. You can actually see the dark part every now and again where the valve is distorted, and if I try and film this, you'll hear it grinding on one side. Grinding all the way round now, so that's corrected that valve. And what I'll do to check it is just move it round a bit and then go in again. Next one. this and just show you how rough these are. So it started to grind here and you can see all the pitting, and then it's completely missed that bit out there where the seat is burnt. So it's started to grind here, although there's pitting. That's the heavy grinding, it's pitting still, and then a complete miss there. And you can actually hear it on the stone as well. That's it, there's just that one tiny little bit, so I'm going to go a little bit more on that one. And there we are, that's the 4 valves reconditioned. And then what I'm going to do is just grind them into the seat as well, and then just mark them so my customer Malcolm can put them back in the order that I've ground them into. So I'm using carborundum paste for this job. Trick is a nice smooth even bead of carborundum around the valve like that. And then I always use a little bit of spray on the seat just to help the carborundum break in. What we're looking for is a really good seat, so going to clean off the excess paste off the valve. That's all broke down now as well. Then you can see a nice grey line all the way round. So we've ground it on the machine to make it nice and shiny and know that it's a good seat on the valve. And then by the time it's ground in, it's gone grey, and that's where the carborundum paste has ground the valve into the seat. And then I'm going to wipe it off the seat to check that the seats are good. And that actually needs a bit more. I'll show you this. And it's probably where that valve was bad that I showed you and distorted. That's probably what's caused a bit of damage on this seat here. And if you can see, there's a nice grey line there and a nice grey line there, and then it's black where the seat's burnt at the top and at the bottom. These ones I haven't done yet, but that's pretty bad there. Now this is a fine paste that I've got in. I was hoping that they was going to go straight in, so I was using a fine. So I'm going to go and get some coarse. I'm going to try them once more, and then if they don't go in, I'm going to cut the seats. Whoa. Do you know what? I'm not even going to waste my time. I'm going to go and set the grinder up, the seat grinder. I'm just going to touch each one of them seats just to recut them so I can get them perfect. I don't think grinding them in is going to work for this job. I think they're a little bit too far distorted, and I think all that'll happen is eventually they would grind in, but they still wouldn't be a very good seat. You would lose some of the definition of the seat, and some of the degrees would probably taper or radius or something like that. So I'm not going to bother grinding any more of these in. I'm going to set up the valve or the valve seat refacer, do them, and then grind them in so we know that they're bang on. It's got to be right. So I'm sorting out these valve seats, and you can see, I don't know if you can see it actually, but there's a black stain in there and just down there, and that's where the seats are distorted. Now unfortunately on this, cutting the seats is going to be pretty tricky, trying to set it up on one of the seat cutters. So what I've got is an old Wolf valve seat grinding machine, which I don't use it very often, but on the older stuff it really is a good bit of kit. It's a grinder instead of a cutter, but once it's all set up and you're like smooth and delicate with it, it does do a good job. So I'm gonna set that up so I can grind these seats, and then we'll lap them in. This is the machine. So these are the different tool holders. There's some adjustable pilots in here, and then underneath there is the old seat grinder. So I'm going to set it up, get a stone at the right angle and right size, and I'll show you how it's done. So the first thing that I've done is locked in this pilot, and it's a tapered pilot. It's a fixed pilot, so that means it stays in the guide, where with like the Surdy, the Pro Valve and the Myra, they're called a live pilot. So they're a straight pilot that spins in the cutter of the machine. But with this being fixed, you lock it in, and basically all you do is you push it in. There's a slight taper around here, and then you tighten that up, and then that locks it in at the bottom and squares it up. Then the next thing to do is to find a stone that is the right size. You want it so it cuts just on the outside, just a little bit bigger than the seat, so you kind of letting the stone come across there. This stone here actually it's worn slightly, so what I'm going to do first is dress that, and to do that in the kit is the driver for the stone. So basically that there fits in there, and then you use it and you bounce it up and down. You just let the weight of the stone just fall against the seat. And we also use this to redress the angle on the stone. We've then also got this, which is basically a diamond here. You set what angle you want to dress the stone to, and then dress that down there, and then this lifts up. Just need to connect that. So we just bounce that up and down on the stone, and it dresses a new angle onto the stone and cleans it all up, make it nice. The other thing that I'm going to do actually is angle the block back to try and get the seat more parallel, so the grinder doesn't want to try and fall in and take it all off one side. Hopefully the camera's picking this up. So what I'm going to do is just switch this on, it's noisy, like that, and then just dress the stone. And take it off and have a look. And as you can see, it's not cleaning it all up properly yet. So a bit more work required. Screw the diamond in a bit more. And then if you look around here, it's cleaned the stone up all the way around there, and then left a tiny little bit there, so we need to get that bit out as well. So a bit more pressure on the stone, on the diamond. And there we go, that's good now. So I've moved the camera back up to the top. I'm doing this one because basically where we've ground it in with the carborundum, we can see actually where the seat is distorted. So this one's a good one to start off with. So I'm making sure that that's all nice and neat on there, and then very carefully holding onto this aluminium bit here. And that looks like a good job. So we'll take the pilot out, and then before we move on to the next one, get some carborundum paste on the valve. And this is still the fine paste. I don't want to get the coarse, to be honest. I want to try and do it with the fine. I need some rag. And that's it, I've wiped it off the valve, and then just give it a wipe off the seat. And yeah, now that's perfect. That's a nice grey line all the way around the seat. So like I said earlier, it's an old seat cutter, but when it's set up right, it does do a good job. You just can't do real big deep cuts with it. So what I'm going to do now is just mark this valve with a number 2, so my customer knows that that's ground in to cylinder number 2. Just like that. And then we're going to move on to the next one. So the first job to do is to just give the pilot a wipe over, because we don't want it to be pushed off course in the guide. Now, where this one hasn't been ground in, we can actually see how bad that seat is. Still needs more down at the bottom there. Unclogging my stone. Next valve, let's see if that one's ground in. Hopefully it has. So what we're doing now is just going to check once again the seating angle on the valve. So that's all good, and then the actual seat in the engine. Yeah, and that's another good one. It's nice and grey all the way around the seat, so we know that that's ground in. Very good. Once again, I've marked it with the location. So wipe the pilot. And I'm really not putting any pressure on that. I'm letting the stone do the work. That just needs a redress now. It's ground all the way round, but I'm not actually that happy with that seat, so I'm going to go a bit more with it. That's better. So once I've finished doing these couple of valves, I'm going to give the block another quick wash off from a customer, and then I'm going to measure the crank. We've already ground the crank, which you've seen that earlier, but I didn't write down the sizes because I did it a couple of months ago, and I can't remember what I ground it to, so I'm going to write down the crank sizes and mark the crank with that. Yeah, nice good seat there. So another one marked. So I've got one left to do. So once again, make sure the guide is, the pilot's clean. Install it into the guide. There we have it, another good seat. I don't know if you can make that out, but there's a nice grey line all the way round all of them seats. This is the one that made me want to correct the seat, because it had the black mark at the top and the black mark at the bottom. So we've ground them all with the Wolf valve grinder. So it just goes to show that, you know, we have all this state-of-the-art seat cutters and things like that, that there is still a place for old equipment like this in the workshop, so we'd never get rid of this. So now this is done, all I'm going to do is wash it off, measure the crank, and get on with another job. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll catch you in the next video. Ta-ra.